Evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me for just an in-depth look at some details concerning our storm on Christmas Eve into Christmas morning. Wanted to do this because I had a lot of fun doing stuff like this last week when we were talking about snow. Unfortunately, this is a less fun weather discussion, but perhaps a little bit more serious of one. As much as the snow certainly impacted us a tremendous amount last week, the potential danger and the potential impact to your daily life is probably higher out of this storm. That's hard to believe than out of a storm where we got 30 to 40 inches of snow. But there's a real chance of a bunch of us losing power on Christmas Day. I don't think it's going to be incredibly widespread. I think it's going to be mostly in the higher elevations. So if you're down in like the Connecticut River Valley, I wouldn't be too concerned at all about power outages. But if you're particularly in most of Bennington County, it could be problematic, and a lot of us here in Western Windham County, Rutland County, and same kind of thing up there in Windsor County, kind of the western part of Windsor County, and I think a lot of places in Rutland County could have some power outage issues. I don't think they're going to be widespread to the point where you're going to be out of power for days or anything like that, but you should certainly be prepared to maybe go a day without power. Hopefully that doesn't happen. It's always tough to know exactly if and when and where power outages are going to happen, but they're definitely possible. You should be prepared for that. And then there's flooding issues, potentially flooding issues. We are going to get a lot of rain. We're looking at probably, everybody probably sees close to 2 inches of rain, but there's definitely the possibility for 3 and maybe even in some spots 4 inches of rain. 2 inches of rain, and I don't think, and we'll just see a lot of ponding on the roads, and the rivers come way up. But anything more than that, and we do start to get ourselves into where some roads might be washed over, and we could have some significant issues. If we get to 4 inches of rain, we really could have some problems. So not great news, not what you want to hear for Christmas Eve into Christmas Day, but unfortunately, I want to make sure that you know what's going on so you can prepare. So let's take a quick look first at what's going on. Also, I will have one thing I did want to say. I'll have an area ready for questions. So if you've got any questions, please ask them in the chat, and I'll be happy to try to address any specific issues if you got them for your specific location or any kind of timing issues or anything. Or if I'm talking, this is going to be kind of a longer stream. So if I'm talking and you're like, hey, Chris, have you answered this question anytime recently? Fire away in the chat, and I'll be happy to try to answer it there for you as we're going along. I've got it pulled up, so hopefully I'll notice. Even if it's not on the screen at the time, I'll hopefully notice it because I've got it pulled up on one of my other screens here. So let's look at what's going on, just to kind of give you a big overview of what's happening with the storm. We're going to start with radar, and what you can see here is that it actually. Let me pop myself up so I can actually show you what's going on there. You can see we've got, here's this basically a front that doesn't look overly impressive at the moment, except for if you look down, we're going to see this on the water vapor imagery even more. But unfortunately, what the front is, it's got a ton of energy with it, a huge temperature contrast on either side of the front. And what's going to happen is we're going to start to get a couple of ripples of low pressure that are going to develop. What they're gonna do is open the floodgates for the moisture, particularly from the south in the Gulf and sorry, just checking a quick email there I got. When do we have to be home Christmas Eve to avoid the rain? Great question, and we could have showers anytime on Christmas Eve afternoon, but heavy rain holds off until 7 p.m. I think at least. So if you wait until if you're home by 7 p.m., the worst of the rain will be before that. Any flooding issues, if we were to have any flooding issues, they actually probably wouldn't happen until Christmas morning. It takes a little bit of time for the rivers to come up. But if you want to avoid like the heavy driving rain, be home by 7 p.m., 6 p.m. if you want to be really safe. Anything before that will probably be showery. The real heavy rain probably doesn't get in here till 10, 11 o'clock, maybe midnight at night. So great question, Ann. Thanks. So that's how the questions work, right? You ask the questions and you get a quick answer. So where was I? Oh yeah. So otherwise, I'm just going to keep talking about what's going on. So we've got this. You can just start to see the convective stuff start. But basically, as those low pressure systems ride up and over us, they're going to really enhance the moisture. We could get a couple of waves of really heavy rain where you get like an inch of rain in an hour and a half or 2 hours. Models have hinted at maybe that happening in 2 waves, one kind of near midnight and one as we head towards morning. Exactly how that happens and exactly where that happens, that won't really be able to tell until the time. But we should basically be prepared for that in southern Vermont and really anywhere anywhere kind of in western New England, particularly south of like 89, and then west into upstate New York. The Catskills and some of the southern Adirondacks are all kind of in the line of fire for that potentially flooding rain. Let's take a look at satellite, because that shows one other thing I wanted to show, and then we're going to look at some models. I don't often go through model maps with you, but I think they're going to be helpful and illustrative this time, so we're going to do that. Here is satellite, and actually this is water vapor, which basically this doesn't show you clouds. Well, it sort of does, but it's not specifically showing clouds. It's specifically showing water vapor in the atmosphere, and you can see these green, you can see this start to bubble here. It basically means that we're finally starting to tap some of that Gulf moisture with the southern stream of the jet, which is pushing in, and that's where these low pressure systems are going to develop. And you can kind of see also along this front, we've got some convection starting. That's what's going to head in our direction. That's going to drive our dew points and our temperatures way up. Tomorrow will be, by tomorrow afternoon, we'll probably be in the upper 40s to near 50, and then we skyrocket up into the 60s, maybe not quite into the 60s, but close to 60 overnight, Christmas Eve into Christmas morning. So that's going to enhance, right? So we've got 2 inches, maybe 3 inches of rain falling, and really warm temperatures. Also, dew points will be very high, which means you're not going to evaporate a lot of the snow. It's going to melt, which means that we're going to have some runoff. The question really for us will be, there's so much snow out there that was so fluffy and is still pretty fluffy. It's been warmer, so it's condensed down, but it's still pretty fluffy. It will absorb some water in the beginning. But once the snow kind of gets saturated with water to the point where it really can't absorb any more water, the water's got nowhere to go. We have frozen ground right now. So that during the summer, 3 inches of rain would not be, even in over 6 hours, it would mean that the rivers came way up, but it would not be anything you'd be too concerned about. But this time of year, with warm temperatures, if we get 3 inches of rain, it's going to be problematic. I think so basically what I mean by problematic, I think it means that some of those places where the rivers go over the road every couple of years, that's definitely a possibility on Christmas morning. I was thinking there was a storm here in Londonderry a couple of years ago in April. There was water went over the road in Weston, and it went over Main Street in Londonderry for a couple hours, and it didn't quite go over the road in South Londonderry, but it went right up to the road in South Londonderry. That would be kind of on the more extreme end of what could happen, but that is definitely, something like that is definitely possible. And if that happens, there are businesses that are definitely impacted by something like that. For instance, I'm on the fire department. It means the South Londonderry Fire Department, we'd have to evacuate the station. We do that with some not regularity, but we have to do that, here and there. It would also mean that if you really should not be out traveling on Christmas morning if you can at all avoid it, because it potentially could be there could be water-covered roads. You just don't want to deal with that. And that's going to be in the midst of also our secondary issue, which is going to be wind. So let me take a look, and I want to show you some issues with wind here. So here's the model that I wanted to take a few minutes and show you. This is basically wind at 850 millibars is what the color is, which is at kind of that lowest level of the atmosphere that's above what we would call the friction layer. And it's good to sample here because it's not really impacted by the mountains, and if you get heavy rain, our winds will be dragged down from it. Now this already, actually, let me get out of the way because I'm kind of in the way of what you can see here. I'm just going to find my cursor. There we go. Let me hide. So what we've got here, this is Friday, this is Thursday evening, and things are already starting to look, this is a very strong, what we would call a jet streak at 850 millibars, with wind speeds, in the 65 knot range. Now those will not mix all the way to the surface at 65 knots, because a 65 knot wind, that's like an 80 mile an hour wind, thankfully. But that's actually not even, this is actually before the storm gets kind of really significant, because if I move this in forward a couple of hours, so here we are, this is what we were looking at before. If we go 6 hours ahead, we can see that this area here gets more significant. Now we're into a jet, we've got winds at 850 millibars, pushing 75 to 80 knots. Are those knots? They are knots. Okay. Again, that's quite strong at 850, and that heads right over the top of us. You can see this would be this is about just about daybreak on Christmas morning, and you can see that the heaviest winds. Oops, let me get rid of my squiggles. The heaviest winds at that point are probably heading just to our east. What could happen there is that these winds won't mix down all the way, thankfully, because that would mean we'd get 80 or 90 mile an hour winds, which obviously would be devastating. That is not going to happen. But during heavy rain, some of those winds could be dragged down to the surface. And so if you get a real heavy pocket of rain, and this can be very sporadic because where you get those heaviest bursts of rain and where you drag down those wind gusts is very, very highly localized, right? So one spot, a quarter mile from another spot, one spot might get, might just have some gusty 20 to 30 mile an hour winds, or another spot gets a real heavy dose of rain, or the terrain is just such that the wind kind of gets funneled into a spot and they get a 50 or 60 mile an hour gust and it knocks over some trees. Really, we probably need 50 mile an hour winds to start to see power outages more than just a few here and there. And I think we could definitely see quite a few of us could see gusts to 50 to 55 miles an hour. So that's enough to cause some power outages. I think you should plan to be out of power for up to a day. I don't think this is going to be like the heavy wet snowstorm we had a couple of years ago where people were out of power for like 4 or 5 days. I don't think it's going to be widespread enough to cause that kind of issue. But you want to be prepped for no power on Christmas morning, or and to maybe go 12, maybe even 24 hours without power. I know that's not going to be everybody, thankfully, because if it's everybody, it'll be more than 24 hours. But it is definitely going to be a problem. You should be aware that there may be trees on the road. Another reason not to travel on Christmas morning. Give road crews time to go out and just get the trees out of the way and clear up any river issues or anything like that, and give the rivers time to come down. They'll subside very quickly. The temperatures cool off. The snow melt ends. But we're probably below freezing by evening on Friday, on Christmas Day, and so that'll help keep us from that'll shut the flooding issues off, and we also get kind of a dry breeze, and things will dry out pretty quickly. And like I said, the power, it doesn't take long. It won't take too long to get power back on, I don't think, because I don't think the problems will be super widespread. However, all this is not great news. This is definitely a pretty high impact storm, and we need to kind of take it relatively seriously for this time of year. I feel like I had a thought. Let me show you or share just kind of the storm highlights. I'll pop those up on the screen. I've basically already said all the stuff that's on here, but I just wanted you to have an idea of what's there. Heaviest rain moves through between midnight and 8 a.m. So that's really when our biggest problems would potentially be. So my suggestion is don't travel between midnight and 8 a.m. And quite frankly, really wait till noon if you can on Christmas Day to travel. Anytime before that, there could still be water on roads potentially, and there could be trees down in the road. And so the more of it you can avoid, the better. After that, as we look forward beyond this storm, the weather does settle down. It's cold on Saturday and kind of a pretty nice day on Sunday before we head more into a more typical winter pattern. Any other thoughts I had? Not that I necessarily need to go any longer here, but certainly if you have additional questions, ask them in the comment section on the YouTube channel, or you can ask them to me on Facebook. And I'll get back to you with answers on that kind of stuff. In terms of specific towns, it's hard to pinpoint where the worst effects of this will be town to town until it happens, because a lot of the things are going to be sort of like thunderstorms. You can tell everybody's prepped that they could happen, but there's not really any way to specifically beforehand really know, except for to say that if you're at higher elevation, the winds will be worse, particularly if you're on a south or an east-facing slope, I think. But really any slope, and that rain probably is worse on those places too. But it's not so much where the rain falls necessarily. It's if you happen to be in a river basin below where it rains really hard, right? So I mean, if you get, it's not a problem at your house if you're going over Terrible Mountain, and they get 3 or 4 inches of rain on the top of Terrible Mountain, right? That's not a problem for you up there. Water-wise, but it's a big problem for Weston if that happens, because it means that the West River really, and everybody else downriver of Weston on the West River. So, one thing, river ice. That was one last thing. There is some river ice out there. There are some places along the West River where there are ice damming issues sometimes. If you live in a place where there are sometimes ice jamming issues, you could you have to keep an eye on that. I know sometimes Cavendish has issues with stuff like that. I know down near Brattleboro, there's ice jamming issues with that. Quite frankly, outside of like my immediate area, I'm not as aware of where the rivers tend to jam up. So if you've got thoughts about that, let me know. I'd love to hear about that in the comment section, or just Facebook message me about where it happens, if it happens on Christmas Day, or also just where that kind of stuff happens in general. Because it tends to be when there's river flooding issues, I tend to be very busy with firefighting stuff, so I don't pay too much attention beyond to what's going on the West River where I actually live. I always want to know that kind of stuff for my forecasting because I think it's important. So, like I said, if you live in a place where there are sometimes ice jam issues, there could be some. I don't think they'll be the significant problem because the river ice is not super thick, and it's also not. And also, the water's going to come up so quickly that I think it'll break the ice up pretty quickly and move it along. However, if it doesn't, there could be problems. So like in my area, that means like near the rescue squad on Route 100, there could be sometimes the water washes over the road there because the ice jams up there, and sometimes also where's the other spot I was thinking? Oh, up in Weston, sometimes kind of north of the village on Route 100 there's sometimes some issues with ice jamming. So we should be aware of that. Okay, that's a lot of rambling. If you've got specific questions, please ask. I want and try to be safe out there. Don't go anywhere on Christmas morning. Stay put unless you really need to. And if you do go anywhere, be very cautious about it. Hopefully, we'll all mostly maintain power. Be prepared to lose it. Which is always a good idea. Not always, but good idea. And hopefully, the water, if it does splash over roads, doesn't really get any higher than just causing a few issues like that, and then kind of moving on. I don't think we're going to get into a situation where lots of property lots of like homes and things like that are endangered by water, but that looks unlikely. So it's not going to be an Irene situation, but it's not going to be great either. Okay. That's more than enough rambling. I'll be back tomorrow morning. I'll do my weekend forecast because I was going to do it a day early anyway because obviously it's a long weekend sort of, or it's a Christmas weekend, so I'm not going to do a forecast on Christmas morning mostly. That's why I'm doing it tomorrow morning. And so I will do a forecast tomorrow morning, and I will also I'll combine that with one last update on the storm, and then it'll probably be texting beyond that. That'll be the last video on this particular storm. It'll be texting going forward after that. Otherwise, I hope you have a Merry Christmas and you get some time to enjoy with the people that you're going to be able to be with this Christmas under, obviously, unique circumstances even without the weather. So I hope you do. And hopefully the weather takes a turn for the better next week.